people like nice people, you know, and it's like that's the piece of this too that I'm like, how far would you actually get if you went full on Miranda Priestley in reality?
You better be really fucking good.
It's all about us, and it's time to bow down. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bow Down. Dennis, as always, I'm so excited to be here with you and chatting. For our audience, today we are diving into The Devil Wears Prada, which is a wonderful piece of media to talk about womanhood with. So I'm so stoked for today.
Yeah, me too. Confession, this is definitely one of my true favorite movies. I would say I wouldn't say it's like the best movie, on a top movie list,
Right.
but from a watchability and enjoyment perspective, like I don't know, there's something about this movie that just really captures, so much for me. And
Yeah.
so I love the opportunity to talk about it and just share and get your thoughts. And what I really love about this is I've watched it so many times, and every time I watch it, I kind of see something a little different, a little nuanced in terms of the behaviors and sort of my initial thoughts. And it's interesting because, I mean, the movie's like 20 plus years old now at this point, I
Right.
suspect.
Yeah.
Um, how as I've gotten older, as I've changed, how my view of things have changed too. And so it's kind of cool. I've kind of grown myself in watching the movie, I,
Yeah.
I think, and how I've seen things. So curious to see your perspective and just can't wait to dive in. So
Yeah. No, I think that's actually a great place to start is maybe how our opinions have shifted about the movie because I think and it's one of those films that's so iconic that like everyone kind of knows about it even if you haven't seen it. Like everyone's heard Cerulean. Um there's just so many like iconic moments that are so enjoyable. But my views have definitely changed. And it'd been a hot second since I watched it, and I was so excited to rewatch it. And one thing that I think is really coming up for me as I get older with a bunch of different movies is how much we're offered paradigms of like it's an either or in movies. And it's like either you can be rich and powerful and miserable, or poor but artistically fulfilled and have true love and actually happy. And I'm kind of like, why? That is just such a false paradigm to me. And um actually a movie that just came out that I went and watched with my girlfriends, The Materialists, I had so many issues with, and it's sparked a lot of conversation online. Maybe that'd be a good one for us to talk
oh,
about too. But it was very much, people are calling it broke boy propaganda, which is really funny because spoiler alert for The Materialists, but she ends up with the broke boy. Um, and it's kind of like, but money is a part of life. Like it's a part of considerations and you do have to make practical decisions when it comes to what you want. And I think the scene at the end when Miranda and Andy are in the car driving and Miranda says, "Well, everyone wants to be us, you know? Like everyone wants this kind of life." And Andy's like, "Not me. I don't." And I'm like, there are parts of that life that you do want though. Like you were seduced by it for a reason. Um and I don't think it's a crime to want the ease of not having to worry about money, right? There's a difference between wanting to be like an unethical billionaire and then just wanting to like not worry about your finances. And I'm like there's a way to I suppose have your cake and eat it too. I don't know, but that was something that I immediately recognized. Like when I was younger, I was like, yeah, Andy made the right decision. She found her true self and like went back and did the right thing. And it's like, actually, what is the right thing? Like it's more complicated than just, you know, work the dream job, and that's it.
Yeah, I agree, and I kind of I went back and forth, and throughout the years in terms of my my views, particularly of Miranda. I
Mm-hmm.
think, although naturally, I mean, I think the dyad there, the relationship between Andy and um, Miranda is I think as my perspective of one shifts, the perspective of the other has to shift as well. Like
Yeah,
I think they exist, they coexist essentially, and so you can't change your view of Miranda, but not somehow change your view of Andy. And no, it's my biggest issue was is Andy knew what she for when I was younger, I definitely felt for Andy, and because I think we've all, I mean, certainly in my working career, I've certainly had bosses who I would consider Miranda-esque. I guess not many
sure.
over time, but definitely a couple. And interestingly, one was female, one was a woman, one was a man. So it wasn't just I know there's and I think there's a lot to talk about. Is oh is Miranda, if it was a man doing what Miranda did. Well, I can say for my own self, at least, like I kind of felt the same way towards the man as I did towards the woman. It was more the attitude and the way it was treated versus
Mm-hmm.
gender for me personally. No, that's not to say society might not think otherwise. Um, and so I kind of and when I first watched it years ago, I was like, oh, isn't it great for it's so wonderful that Andy left and and stuck it to really showed her. But then the older I got, the more I realized that I felt Andy was kind of an immature character, and really she was originally you think she's the protagonist and Miranda's the anti-hero in some senses. Um and then as I think I've gotten older, it's moved from the Reddit subreddit of am I the asshole? It went from yeah, you're the asshole, Miranda, to everybody kind of sucks here,
Yeah,
to to more of a well, nobody's forced into this, right? Like what you're getting. I mean, yeah, okay, you could say I had no idea Miranda was going to be the way she was, right? Like when you started out, like although there were certainly clues, like if you couldn't tell from
right.
the interview, like when somebody, there was no hiding this or something, and so I mean, Andy chose to stay there. It was her choice, but then and so I don't know. Those were my initial thoughts. And so when she left at the end, especially the older I've gotten, it's like, wow, you threw away a pretty valuable potential opportunity, even if you didn't want to do the fashion thing.
Right.
Like okay, I wanted to do something else, but you just kind of quit on this for what exactly? Now, in the book, as I recall, it was a different reason that drove her to go back home. Like her best friend was in an accident, I think, and she was in Fashion Week, but her best friend was in the hospital after a car crash or something. Like it had nothing to really do with the boyfriend as much in the book, which maybe is a little bit different, in fact. Like her basically leaving because she cheated on her boy. Oh, I'm turning into you, cheated on my boyfriend, although they were on a break, as Ross would say, from Friends. I don't know, my view has changed, I guess, but yeah, I'm gonna stop there because I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but
No,
I
no,
do love this movie.
yeah, no, it's so many iconic moments. Um, but yeah, no, I agree. I like what you said about like, oh, Miranda's clearly the asshole to kind of like everybody sucks here is very much the transition. Um, because also it's just like no one, like you said, it's like no one's forcing you. And I guess in some ways, in the beginning of the movie, we see Andy struggling to get a job, and it's kind of like, well, is this the only option to like make rent, right? And you kind of have to go along to get along for a little bit. But at some point, it's like if it's a big ethical consideration for you, like you can wait tables instead. It's like even though it's like the other choice may not seem ideal, you do always have a choice. And I think that was the thing in the argument with the boyfriend that I found so interesting is he said that's your answer to everything lately is I don't have a choice. I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a choice. But you do. And to me it's like that really is the main problem is that no, you do have a choice. Even if one option does not seem like the choice you want to make, doesn't mean it's not an option. And that's kind of what being an adult is like weighing two options that both have bad qualities to them. And I don't think there's anything wrong with also like wanting to be career focused and focus on that instead of your boyfriend. It's like that's not a crime. The problem is that Andy wasn't communicating that in her relationship, right? Is that like she was trying to do both of these things and it very much does become kind of self-centered, but it's like also she gets her makeover and all of a sudden she's this different person, right? It's like there is something that's like that fashionista that were the girls you made fun of is in you too, you know? And it's very much like that's what projection is that you know that all of these girls when she walks in for the interview and they're in their high heels and their full makeup and their stylish outfits and she's like, "Well, those belts look exactly the same." It's projection of that aspect of her that she sees in those women. That it's like, "No, you know that you have that in you too, but there's something about you that hates that you have that in you. But there's nothing wrong with liking beautiful things, with wanting to be a workaholic, as long as you're communicating that and not using it as an excuse to treat people in your life shitty. Like, that's not okay. Um, but yeah. And I think even the scene that was just the most like flabbergasting to me that I just completely forgot about is after there's like some gala that she goes to instead of her boyfriend's birthday party because she has to go and she doesn't have a choice and she's leaving and the writer is like, "Hey, my editor at the New Yorker is inside, let me introduce you." And that's when Andy says, "No, I have to go." And I was just kind of like, isn't that the whole point? Like, that's the only part of this that I could justify missing your boyfriend's birthday for is meeting the editor of the New Yorker, not a gala for your boss that you feel forced into taking, right? And it was like, holy cow, I get that you're running very late and you feel really bad, but it's like, it, just weird. And it's like, there is a piece of you that does like the glitz and the glam, but demonizes it about other people.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree completely, and that is an you know, I think a lot of Nate and Andy's problems could have been solved with just communication,
Yeah.
like that. You know, again, I think the film really does present a false choice. You had mentioned that earlier. You know, it's this false choice between career and personal life, and
Yeah.
it basically deepens this chasm somehow that women have to they can't successfully balance personal and professional lives. And that's kind of the message we've been taught. And honestly, men don't face that same double standard. Mainly because they're not like it's perfectly fine for a man. I mean, perfectly fine, whatever that means, right? But it's acceptable. It's you if you hear, oh gee, you know, my husband's working late because his boss is on him. He's got to, you know, he's entertaining clients. He's doing this. He's doing that. Like no one would blink twice at that.
Right.
All of a sudden now, and you know, it's another scene that I wanted to bring up because it's along the same lines is, you know, what did Andy really do that was so awful to her friends exactly? Like, so she goes, she's late one day. I'm thinking of the dinner scene where they're all sitting, you know, she's there to meet them for dinner, right? And she brings a bunch of expensive shit from the magazine, right? From Vogue or whatever it's called. It's not Runway, I guess it's called
Yeah.
in the movie, right? Uh, and including like an expensive purse that no one can get, like, a Bang & Olufsen phone, which I don't know if our viewers today, I remember that fucking phone. And I remember
That's
going into
funny.
the Sharper Image, store in the mall back in the 90s and seeing this $1,000 phone and being like, oh shit, I wonder what it would be like to have one of these phones, Like, so I actually remember that fucking phone, which is
That's
what's so
so
funny.
funny.
It's so funny about it. Like, I remember that phone. And but they're all perfectly happy to accept these gifts, right? Oh, got this for you. Oh, love the purse. Oh, give and then her boss calls, and then they're really dicks to her, like taking her phone, not giving it back to her. Like, that's shitty. Like, yeah, okay, you may not think that this job should be so important, but it is important to Andy. It matters to her. Whether or not it should or not is not for you to fucking decide,
Right.
Like, if you're her friend, you support her. You say,
Exactly.
like, and that's what a relationship or any friendship or relationship is. It's like, hey, I get, and you could say, oh, well, I'm not a priority compared to your, you know, well, again, though, it's your birthday, dude. Like, we can celebrate that like another day. Like, this is important to my career. This is important to me. I've told you about it. Shit happens. This is what you're getting. And maybe that's part of
Yeah.
the problem too, right? They started their relationship before this, and now they're moving their Andy's changing,
Yes.
for better or for worse. I don't, I don't make that judgment, but she's growing. She's metamorphosizing into someone else. Now, she said, I don't want to be this person. So she left, which again, there's no right or wrong to that decision, but her friends are not terribly supportive of her. Like, they seem very
No.
kind of insecure and like, oh, love the benefits of the thing. Like this workplace was not her harming Andy. Like, she
No.
again was choosing this. Like, again, I'm not saying you should or shouldn't choose it, but like, if somebody does choose it, it just shows important open communication. Like, I feel like when she took this job, it was like, hey, Nate, even that time when he's like, hey, now you've turned in, like, his exact quote, I wrote it down because I thought it was interesting, was like, Nate says something like, oh, I don't care if you're out pole dancing all night, which I want to point out, like, okay, why are we shaming? Like, notice that, like, just to notice that. Again,
Yeah.
not judge it, but you could be out pole dancing all night, but if you did it with integrity versus becoming like the girls you used to make fun of. Well, okay, she used to make fun of them, but now she doesn't because she's changed her perspective. Like, you know, I used to make off-color jokes. I don't anymore. That doesn't why? Because that's not who I understand that it's not, I misjudged. I
Right.
was in error when I judged these people before. Now, again, and not to say they're who I want to be or who I don't want to be. But so yeah, I think it's interesting how, again, multiple rewatches show these different little things that come up. I mean, to me, I see there's kind of the two characters to me that are most important to talk about. I think, and we've been kind of going there, but maybe diving deeper into them if you like, if what you think. But Miranda obviously is is larger than life character. Andy, and then to me, I kind of view it as like sort of the other various male characters, including Nate, but other male gatekeepers as well. Irv, as the power figure, and the um Christian Thompson. Like, again, he
Yeah.
noticed the power structure there. He's a male gatekeeper, right? It's interesting how how she how these other male characters, though they're, to me, not main. I wouldn't consider any of the men to be main characters. Like, there's no male
Yeah.
lead, I wouldn't say. I mean, you could argue Nate, I guess, sort of, but I don't think so. I feel like
Yeah.
the male side is an ensemble, and the female side is very clearly Andy and Miranda are the two characters. So I don't know. Is there one that it would make sense to start with, especially like focus on a little bit first? Is there one that comes up to you, just to make sure we talk to all of them, because I think they're
Yeah. Um maybe let's dive into Miranda. I think that that's like just such an obvious like you said, she's an icon in so many ways, and even though um she is kind of quote unquote the villain of the movie, it's very much like, well, in pop culture, Miranda's the winner for sure. Like, how many times have I said florals for spring? Groundbreaking. Like, it's just so good. It's so good. And one thing that really stood out to me that I was like, that's a pretty self-aware move for the movie, is when Andy is actually on the date with Christian Thompson and he's like, well, what do you think about Miranda really? And she was like, well, the thing is, if Miranda was a man, everyone would just talk about how she is a successful business person, period. And like doesn't take bullshit, and that's who they are. But because Miranda's a woman who is divorced and remarried and has daughters and is demanding, like, sure, is she the kindest, nicest person? No. Obviously, we see that throughout the film. But I do think that there is this added expectation, like you were talking about earlier, of um, women needing to juggle both, and Miranda's character almost being used as showing how, well, if you value career, you can't be a good mom, you can't be a good wife. And it is kind of the impossible obligation of a woman that we've talked about before. But I just absolutely love, love, love the scene in Paris where Andy walks in and Miranda's just sitting there, no makeup on. Um, and she's just completely stripped back. And you just see so much of her humanity, right? And I think that's the moment that the audience, it doesn't necessarily fall in love with Miranda, because it's like, how can you not love, her little quips and the power, and even the very first scene where she's walking out of the elevator and she just has this like look and goes, and it's like, ooh, it's just so good. Meryl Streep's amazing, of course.
She's
She's just so good. But I think that's really the scene that makes her an iconic character, because even throughout, the mask has slipped, but she is still clear about who she is and is still in business mode, right? That she's like, I'm showing you a vulnerable side of me because I need you to rearrange the seating chart and get my publicist on the phone. And it's like, just to see the pressure of being a powerful woman that is, even in this moment of vulnerability, completely stripped bare, second divorce, like being faced with the reality of sacrificing your personal life, like your love life. And I think she even mentions like, oh, and the girls, it's like being a mom, but choosing to make that choice again and again, because that's the choice that Miranda makes, that it's like, that's who she is. And I think, to some extent, while I don't agree with the forced dichotomy that's there, to a certain extent, I kind of respect it. I kind of respect that Miranda's like, this is the life that I chose. And when I'm served divorce papers, that means my first thought has to be my publicist. Like, there's just something about it that it's like, it's so heartbreaking, but also like the balls on someone to be able to do that. And like, when Andy's like, we can cancel things, we can whatever, and she's like, no, that's not the life I live. That's not who I am, because I'm more than that. I don't know. I'm not
Yeah.
describing that perfectly, but yeah, I think those are some initial thoughts on Miranda.
Yeah, it's I think I agree completely in terms of I think Miranda highlights the double standard of female leadership, right? Like this, and as you said, the film specifically calls that out. So, enough. And we've all said that. I mean, and in fact, I watched something else I mean, it's a very clear thing. Like, would you say this about a man versus a woman? Um, and so, I think that was great. I mean, I think that there is sort of Miranda is sort of stereotyped into this ice queen, right?
Yeah.
She's absolutely brilliant, but personally harsh, with no close friends, unstable relationships. She can't keep a man, right? And her multiple divorces, all of that. And I do think it does reinforce that harmful trope that powerful women have to sacrifice. You can't be good, nice, and succeed. And I mean, I wonder, and as I was thinking about it, so comparing, who would you rather have as a boss, Reese? If would you rather have Miranda, Michael Scott from The Office, or Dr. House from House MD? You know, who is also, so which of those three? So you got two guys. So Miranda, you know, of course we know, we've been talking about her, very, you know, brilliant but icy, right? And you know, uh, Michael Scott says just as many outrageous and and you know, cringy things, right? It'd probably be as difficult to manage in some senses as Miranda might be. But, you know, Michael has heart, whereas you don't
Right.
necessarily, you never really see heart I mean, you kind of do at the end where like Andy's like, oh, she wrote a letter saying I'd be, you know, oh, you know, Miranda really wrote a letter saying, you know, that was sort of like the payoff, right? The, oh, Miranda
Yeah.
really did like me kind of thing at the end. And I'm not even sure that I'm not sure that Miranda would do that actually, but to
Yeah.
be honest with you, I'm actually not sure that within the frame of the character that Miranda's worldview would actually allow for Andy's autonomy as a good thing. To be
Yeah.
honest with you, I feel like that was like a feel good to the audience. I don't know that I agree that that was true to Miranda's true character. Like, I don't think the minute Andy left her, she would like not give a shit, in my opinion.
Right. Right.
Like you're dead to me kind of thing is sort of what I would get out of Miranda. But
Yeah.
again, but who would you rather have as a boss? And then House, of
That
course, you
is
have this absolutely brilliant guy who's basically a demigod, but again, is you know, is House different than Miranda? Like, you know, and like other than gender.
yeah, right, right, right. You know, I do think in some ways, if you remove like the work-life balance of it, because I think like the appeal of Michael Scott is like, well, it is at least more of a traditional 9 to 5, and with Miranda, it's very clearly like, oh, you're on call all the time, you know? But if you just remove that and you take the personality, I'm kind of like, at least with Miranda and House, you really know what you're getting. And I think with Miranda, it opens up the door for more opportunity. Whereas Michael and House, it's like, what what are you really getting from having a difficult boss? Like, if you're making that sacrifice, I guess House, you could make the argument that you're really, really learning underneath him. Like, you would just learn so much because he's brilliant. But I'm like, you would learn so much from Miranda too. I mean, honestly, I'm kind of like, I think it is Miranda. If you take out the like being constantly on call, I think that piece is like, that's just untenable. But if you remove that,
That's fair. Yeah, because you don't
you
really
know,
you. That's fair. Because House is the same way, right? They were always on call, and you know
right,
they were working. Yeah, I guess the question is, what can you learn from? You know, if you're going to have a difficult boss, then it better be somebody you can learn from.
right,
Like, you know, it's because I mean, you know, again, if House wasn't completely made up and you know doing things
right.
that no doctor would ever do, let's suppose that he was the genius that you know he's meant to be. I could see, you know, somebody who loved medicine really learning a lot from that
Yeah,
person that they could take that. Same with Miranda. You know, I mean, obviously, you know, but you know, does she teach? You know, does Miranda try
yeah,
to teach, or are you just learning through observation? Like, you know, what are you really being taught? I don't know. It's just an interesting thought experiment. Like, what do we
yeah,
like? I agree. Michael Scott would probably be the easiest of the bosses to
right.
work for, but also probably but also paper company less interesting just in
Well, and
general.
I think you
So
get
yeah,
the least out of it, right? Too, that it's like, yeah, probably the easiest, even though he's eccentric and quirky, and I mean, he's Michael Scott. But it's just the most typical of the jobs, right? And it's funny you say that. I was even thinking because there's one cold open for The Office where Michael's like halfway through the Devil Wears Prada and he's treating Pam like she's Andy and he's like being Miranda Priestley. And he's like, "Get me Armani," and being so rude, throwing his coat on her. And then he comes in after he finishes the movie and goes, "I owe you an apology." And Pam is like, "Oh, you finished the movie and realized that Miranda actually isn't the hero," which is just funny. But it's like you get that, right? That it's like that's the quirks of that character, but it's like, hey, at least she get a clock out. But I think there is something, at least to me, in my value with, like, if I had a corporate job, I would want it to be something that is going to serve my overall career ambitions. And we see pretty quickly with Andy, like, the connections she makes. She's able to get, which this is just a wild plot point,
Yeah.
an unpublished Harry Potter book
Yeah.
for the twins, which is just like wild. But the fact that, like, she makes connections just through being at parties that big names go to, like, that's a big part of wanting to succeed in business, right? It's like, well, if I was going to make any sacrifice like that, I'd kind of want to be in that room and be able to glad hand with those people if you're making that sacrifice.
Yeah, it's kind of like, in a lot of the value of, like, say, an MBA or
right
is in the connections and less so necessarily the curriculum. It's about the people you meet and the connections you make and what that leads to versus oh, I learned so much, because anyone can watch YouTubes and probably, get business knowledge and figure things out, right? I mean, or ask ChatGTP at this point, like,
right.
MBA on your screen. Another thing about Miranda, I think, though, that is I do like is she never does play the damsel in distress role, and I wonder if that's why a lot of men in general, have more of a negative reaction. I think to Miranda, because I can say when I first watched the movie, my reaction towards her was very negative, very, very, very negative, and it was only over time as I rewatched and sort of grew up a little bit and saw things that I'm like, wait a second, this is, and now part of it is she's just not a likable character. I mean, and
right.
deliberately so. I mean, she, but again, taking aside the fact that she's written not to, why don't we like her? And, I think part of it is, men perhaps have had it embedded in our DNA to be the protectors, right? And all of a sudden now you have a woman who doesn't need protecting. And I think that's threatening to a lot of men that, wow, and so in that sense, I do see Miranda as a bit of as a trailblazer from a feminist perspective. And I think people would say that, what Anna Wintour is that, right? I mean, in real life, right? I mean, that she knows what she wants. She's a strong, powerful woman who breaks the hegemony that exists. But even in the movie, like, Miranda had to fight for herself. Like, she was being done dirty. Being replaced by, what she was being replaced by somebody younger and cheaper. And, so she had to fight for herself. So even then the movie shows how, knives have to come, like, she's a survivor, period. And if nothing else, that maybe she taught Andy how to survive, I guess, in some senses, because you can't escape from that experience unscathed, essentially, so yeah.
Yeah, I really love that depiction of her as a survivor, because in this impossible scenario, it almost makes me think of, like, way back in the day, like, how would you gain autonomy as a woman, if you don't want to get married in like medieval times, like back in the day, if you don't want to get married and gain money, and hopefully your husband dies and then you could just be a widower and live on his money and have some independence, but you're gonna have to have kids and, like, the whole thing. Really, the women that we see have the most autonomy are the ones who become brothel owners, and usually it's because they work their way up through a brothel. And it's like, you have to sacrifice a certain amount of something as a woman, which, not to, of course, demonize sex work, but it's like, that just may not be something that every woman wants to do. And those are the women that actually have the most autonomy, and the only business owners that we see historically until, like, the last 50 years, the only businesses that women are allowed to own are sex work. And it's like, and yet they're demonized for doing that type of work. But those are survivors. Those are women who look at the system and say, how can I reclaim my autonomy? And that makes me think of Miranda, where it's like, she's looked at the system and said, how can I make this work for me? How can I have the most autonomy? And I think even in this like survivor mindset, it's like, with her second marriage, maybe her first husband, because we don't know much about her marriages, maybe her first husband was pre the character of Miranda Priestley that we see, right? Because we pick up in the middle of the story with Miranda. Um, and so similar to Andy, like, you've changed, you're not the same person, they get divorced. But with the second husband, I would have to imagine it's like, you know what you're getting. You chose to marry Miranda Priestley. Were you expecting her to not be Miranda Priestley? And I think part of it is this, like you were saying, this feeling of like, well, still wanting to protect and provide, but you chose to want to protect and provide for a woman who needs no protection and likely provides for you.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, if you can't handle that, yeah, like, can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And it sucks that getting divorced is then, because it's almost always so much worse for the woman in terms of like the bad press is going to be about Miranda being a divorcee, not anything about her husband. But it's like, yeah, she's surviving. And even in that scene, it's like she goes into survival mode. Okay, we need to call the publicist. We need to change the seating arrangement. Like, this is an issue. How do we solve it? How do we solve it?
Yeah, to move past, and I think part of that's a coping mechanism, right? Like immediately go
Sure,
back to
sure.
work. But it also does show, this isn't her first rodeo in this either. Like and she handles it the way she always handles it. But the only thing that I think the only, after having watched this so many times, the only piece that I still struggle with respect to Miranda is that her girls do, there really doesn't seem to be much redeeming about her girls. Like, they do not seem to be,
Yeah.
they are kind of one-dimensional brats. And she doesn't seem to see that, which is a little bit, to me, I feel like that was a, like, there's nothing redeeming about these kids. It's very clear they seem very spoiled. They're jerks. They're not, they're they and and it's clear her mother doesn't see that. Like, Miranda doesn't
Yeah.
see that of her kids. And that's the only thing I wish, in terms of like from a feminist perspective, like, man or woman, you the fruit never falls far from the tree. And again, the
Yeah.
fruit of the girls is not great fruit as far as we're presented in the movie. Like, they deliberately, they're very selfish, they're very conniving, they're very now, again, I don't blame them, because that's probably what they needed to do to get ahead in the world with their mother, right? Was
Right.
was to be that way, because so yeah, I and the other interesting thing is just, again, how Miranda's connections are really what are her protection. So despite
Yeah.
her being who she is, she's ready to be put to pasture. And I don't know, it reminded me of one of the more interesting parables in the New Testament that Jesus gives about um a somebody who's basically manages the accounts of a rich man, and he's told to go and like all, and so like he handles all the accounts. He's going to all of these people who owe his master money, right? Like, oh, you owe $100,000 and you owe 50,000, denarius or whatever they had back then. And basically Jesus is like, yeah, go and go to the first guy and say, hey, you owe my master $100,000, but you know what? If you give me 50, we'll call it done. And so he gets, and he does that, and he basically says, go do this to all these other people so that they'll owe you, basically, so that, and I just thought it was just, I don't know, that struck me about sort of Miranda's, Miranda following that advice essentially by
Yeah.
going and saying, hey, here's a list of all the designers and photographers and models and that aren't going to work with me, that will follow me wherever I go. Do you still want to
Right.
get rid of me? Oh, maybe
Yeah.
not, like, but she had to put that pressure on. But,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
brilliant. I mean, brilliant.
Right. And I think that is so interesting. And I think for me, the big issue is like, you catch more flies with honey, right? Um, that that is, I think, the thing that's so hard for me is you can be a very demanding boss with high expectations and still be nice, and it's like also that false equivalence too, that is like you have to be meek and mild or a bitch, right? And it's like, no, there is some middle ground here, and it would have been, I think, cool to see, which I guess we do see a little bit with Miranda's, well, I don't know actually. I was about to say her relationship with Nigel, but I don't think that's true. I don't think we really see any relationship with Miranda that is kind at all. Um, but I'm like, in reality, I actually think while yes, being cutthroat is good in some ways in the business world, 9 times out of 10, like people like nice people, and it's like that's the piece of this too that I'm like, how far would you actually get if you went full on Miranda Priestley in reality?
You better be really fucking good. Like
Yeah.
that. I mean, it's the same with Dr. House, right? In that fictional
Yeah.
character. Like no one would get away with the shit he gets away with, but and he even says
His
it in one
house.
episode. He's like, one of his origin episodes, because they'd occasionally put in,
Mm-hmm.
like backstory along with the medical shit. And I mean, essentially he tells the story of like this doctor in Japan that when his father was stationed in Okinawa or Japan or something, because his father was in the military, he was at this hospital and there was this guy who was a janitor. He was like on the lowest rung of Japanese society, whatever the case was. And he was a janitor, but he was also a doctor. And basically they would call him in when they couldn't figure something out, despite the fact that they hated him and thought he was inferior or this, that, and the other thing. But he was, and so House was like, yeah, but he was right. So they had to go to him. And that sort of inspired him. And in some senses, I get the same kind of vibe out of Miranda, right? Is this,
Yeah.
and so you can be that way, but you better be really good.
Gotta be the best.
Like you better be like, you need to be that, I mean, Michael Phelps can do whatever he wants because he can back it
Yeah.
up with his swimming, or, talent, definitely buys a lot.
Yeah. That's
like,
true. That's a really good point. That it is there, which I think in my like ethical philosophical opinion, I'm like, no one is good enough to treat people horribly. But I think in reality, you're right that like, no, there is a certain threshold that once you wield a certain amount of power, like because of your talent, like if you are that good, you can, right? Like that people will allow that to a certain extent. I think that's a really good point. Do you want to? Oh, sorry, you were going to say something.
no, I think we should we move on to Andy, because we do
Yeah,
need
that's
to be
exactly
mindful
what I
of
was.
time. I read
Yeah.
you read my mind.
Yeah.
Well, just one last thought though, in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah,
like
yeah.
just I was in corporate America 20 plus years, and I probably had 25 bosses over that time period. And interestingly, I would say I have to do the math, but I would wager actually more than half, probably closer to 2/3 to 3/4 were women over men. Interestingly, despite being in a generally pretty sciency area, in finance and or STEM, data science and other stuff. Most of my bosses have been women, um, and honestly, I've gotten along with every boss I've ever had but one, and that was a weird situation, and it had to do with me being a brand new leader and being like 29 or 30 or something, and reporting to somebody 3 or 4 band levels above me who just didn't have the time to mentor me, or there was a big gap in the power. Anyway,
Sure.
but I wonder how people see me or saw me as a boss. Like because there's some aspects of myself that are probably Miranda like in some ways, like without realizing it. And so, even watching that's like, okay, am I coming off this way? And so I would always, I think people did like working for me in general, because I'm still friends with people who worked for me. Um, but I could see where somebody would, there's a fine line between being, nice, but also having expectations. And some people you know, is it unfair to expect somebody to work till 11 p.m. to get something done on an important deadline? And the answer to me to that is no. Like, what, on the other hand, I also think I shouldn't be asking you to do that. If I'm asking you to do that every day, that's a problem, or every week. But you know what? If it's hey, there's a big thing, we're all in this. We got a big thing to presentation to the board tomorrow. Like we need to work all night. Like my expectation is you'll do that. If it's infrequent. But some people could take umbrage of that. Oh, I'm 9 to 5. I don't do that. So yeah, I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
different stereotypes. But so Andy is so interesting to me because um she starts in one way and obviously um becomes that which she is seeing every day, which is actually very metaphysical, and it's very true because what we dwell on is where we dwell is what we become. I mean, without
Yes.
question. And she chose to be there, so it's no surprise that it transformed her. What I don't love, I guess, is though she's not taken seriously until she becomes beautiful. Like in all truth, I mean, and now again, that makes sense at Vogue, I suppose, right, or Runway. I mean that to some degree, but it's also true externally as well. Like her value goes up immensely to everyone when she starts dressing nicely versus dressing in her what was it? You fish that out of some tragic bin down at the casual corner or something.
Yeah.
Not realizing that it was handpicked for you by the very people in this room, sort of thing,
Hmm.
which was a great sort of like level setting to
Yeah.
Andy, I think. But the fact is like she became beautiful and all of a sudden her life changed is what the film
Yeah.
presents. Whereas I would argue, her attitude, what really changed is her belief, right? So it goes back to this: what you believe. She believed she was too good for this place, that she and I
Yes.
think Nigel said it perfectly. This place that so many of us would have dreamt to work at, you only deigned to work at.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden that belief changed for her, and that changed everything. But yet as the viewer, we're made to believe, oh, it's because now all of a sudden she's wearing Prada, or she's wearing
Right.
Givenchy, or whatever the case is. And I don't love that, because it's only after she becomes thinner and more fashionable and, oh, I'm a size 2 now, or whatever, a size 4, 6 is the new 4, or 4 is the new 6, 2 is the new 4, 0 is the new 2. um it's a problematic message to me that makeover equals empowerment, because I know it's not true. It doesn't matter. Yeah,
Right.
if you don't change, the inside is what changes the outside.
Yes.
You're still there. You're just wearing different clothes. Like and you don't. I would have loved to see her transform in like not have it be, oh, she assimilated, essentially. She became
Right.
a clacker to you know to become valuable. Like she wasn't and where I would argue she was always valuable. It was just her beliefs that got in the way, her belief that
Yeah.
she was only here, this reticence to jump in, I guess, in some
Right.
senses, and to say, hey, you know what, I'm and it's again this part of her, right, that says, oh, this is below me somehow, and but there was another part of her that was all engaged in it. And to see that war, and then the part of her that's like, and then how it was reinforced. I mean, she didn't meet Christian until she was pretty. Like, would Christian have helped her had she been frumpy, Andy? Like, back from the beginning with that horrible bag,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
What message does that send to my daughter watching the film? Like, I don't love that, but I also think it is kind of true to life. I mean, the fact is, this isn't, prison ain't no fairy tale. The world isn't a fairy tale. Like, it does matter. Like, how you look
Yeah.
does matter to other people.
Yeah. And I think especially in that industry, I know pretty minimally about it, but from what I do know about modeling from my time spent acting when I was younger, it's very much like I mean, and this is true even of acting, like when you walk in the room, they need to see you as that role. And if they don't, like, you don't want someone to have to do extra work to imagine you being the thing you want them to see you as, like in that role or as that figure in their photograph or the cover. Um, and I think that's true of jobs too, right? And very much if I was Miranda Priestley and I'm like, I'm sending an assistant to a party to pick up this sketch from this designer, I don't want Andy in that sweater, like an Argyle sweater and skirt walking in there, you know? It's like, even though it may be a superficial thing, it's part of the reality of the industry and of just how people are treated. And that's true of men and women. But I think very much that is the message that's sent, that it's like, I agree with you that it's like she always had the ability to be a good assistant. She always had the ability to do her job well, clearly, because she starts doing her job well. But I think that changing the appearance was something that it's like it visually signals to the audience this internal change. And I think there could have been a way for them to do it that was like, well, she doesn't have to be quite so frumpy. She doesn't have to like not brush her hair. Like there are little things that are like, okay, she can swipe on some mascara and it be okay. She doesn't have to wear full designer ensembles every single day for her to still look presentable. Like again, it's very much like there's this false dichotomy that we're presented, that it's like it's only either one or the other, and it's like that's just not true. And you know, we're told dress for the job you want, not the job you have. And I do think there is something to like, as a woman, you do kind of have to know how to do your makeup in order to, like, you don't have to be an expert at it, but if you show up to work without makeup on, that's considered unprofessional. If you're wearing, like if your nails are chipped, that's considered unprofessional. And there are just certain things that it's like, it seems like that's ridiculous, but in a lot of ways that is the expectation. But,
Yeah, I can say
yeah,
just from it's still, you know, this movie may be 20 plus years old, but it is still true. I mean, and not
right.
to name, but um, I know in one of the jobs I worked, you know, in talent reviews, there were women who were very, very competent. One in particular I'm thinking of, and the head of the department was like, you know, did you see the way she dresses? Like basically making, you know, she's frumpy. Like, you know, no,
Yeah.
so that not promotion material kind of thing. And, you know, again, I'm not going to name and shame or anything like that, but it's very real is my only point.
Yes. Yeah.
And I noted that, and I thought it was the employee in question actually worked for me, and I thought she was an incredible employee, and you know, certainly deserved consideration for a
Right.
promotion, and certainly shouldn't have been, you know, rejected on the basis of what she wore to work. And the fact is it wasn't like she was wearing cutoffs and, you know, like flip
Right.
flops. Like
Right.
but she was wearing, you know, comfortable, generally casual clothes. You know, I mean, perfectly appropriate to me. But again, not that's not who I don't really judge a book by appearances in that way. And
Right.
I didn't then. To me, it's all about what do you bring? Like
Yeah.
I don't give a
Yeah.
shit what you look like. You know, if you're good enough, like I'll take you the way
Yeah.
you are, you know.
Yeah.
But obviously not, you know, so that is still alive and well. And I agree with you. You know, um but is it wrong to love that? I mean, is it wrong to, you know, you see how people respond to you, it makes you feel better. I mean, so it's like this virtuous cycle, right? You know, but again, I would argue the biggest change is she's like, you know what, I I need to surrender to this. This is it's acceptance
Mhm.
of the fact that this is where I am right now. And
I
without
think assimilation, the word that you when you said assimilation, that really captures what happens, right? That it's like it's not just her playing the game. She assimilates.
yeah, and but when she does, it goes well for her.
Yeah.
Which you know, which again, I mean, the fact is it's probably true. It's probably more true than it is false. In all I mean, I wish we live again. This isn't a fairy tale world. Like I wish we lived in a world where appearance didn't matter, and that everyone could judge us based on our souls versus, you know, how we present ourselves. But the fact is you know. our senses rule us all too often. And at least most of us. I mean, I don't proclaim like I'm above it all.
Right.
I certainly make snap decisions and or estimations and things much less than I used to when I was younger. And I hope to get to a point where I don't do it ever. I don't know that
Yeah.
that's ever. I mean, one can dream. One has to have. But to me, that's like that's a moonshot.
Yeah.
Because humans are humans. Our ego is our ego. Now, how quickly can I correct and change, and discipline myself to say, no, is that what I really, that's not lovely. And again, that's what I keep going back to. Like, I don't want to have unlovely thoughts, though I do. um, but again, I don't feel like Andy was ever, I mean, is what she did to, so, the movie makes this big deal, right, out of her screwing over Emily, right? And I
Yeah.
put screwing over in quotes because why was that such a, I mean, why would she say no to her boss saying, I want you to go? Like, in what world would anyone ever do? And yet she's made to be out some monster, oh, what a harpy. How could you do that? You backstep. No, like, fuck you. If you were better, you would have gotten to go. Like, that's like basically saying, oh, no, I'm not going to take the starting position from the quarterback, even though I earned it. Like, like,
Yeah.
so why did we get all, like, why would it, I never got up and I can say that even watching it the first time, I really never gave a shit that she, like, that's fucking life. Like,
Yeah.
she wasn't like, she didn't do anything underhanded. She wasn't like sabotaging Emily and like, like gaslighting her and making her like undoing her work to make her look crappy.
Right.
Right. She was just being Andy. Like, she never did anything wrong. So why would, and was that really screwing, even when Miranda goes, well, how could you ever, I did that to Nigel, you did, I could never do that to Nigel. Oh, you did it to Emily. That's kind of a false
Not
equivalency in
really.
some,
Yeah, I agree with that.
that's, and to me, the false equivalency even is to say, I mean, was Miranda wrong to do what she did? Should she, I mean, what should Miranda have friggin' done in this situation? Like,
Yeah. I think, at least with Andy, I think it's because her character is painted out to be like the moral one, that this is supposed to be another like oh, how this has changed her and she's a bad person now, not just different. um but I agree with you about that decision, and it's hard because it is something that I'm like, her and she was clearly trying to forge a friendship with Emily, and it's just not a friendly thing to do. However, when was Emily ever friendly to her? And that was kind of my piece, is it's like, well, you treat other people the way you want to be treated. If you really cared about this and someone um you know didn't say no because they knew you wanted it, but at the same time it's like, if you like, it is a job, it's not personal at the end of the day. And it's also not Andy's fault entirely. And Emily was horrible to her. It's like, why would you? I've tried so hard to be your friend. You never once made this easy on me. And I figured it out on my own and succeeded. Like, that to me is very much like, why would you expect someone to keep treating you like a friend? It's like, somewhat people get mad when you finally treat them the way they treat you. It's like, that was very much that thing there. I do think it's a totally false equivalent with Miranda, because to me, that was, Miranda probably should have fallen on her sword. And if there was a way that, like, I think there is a world wherein she still keeps her job from Jacqueline, and Nigel, and not throw Nigel under the bus, right? Like, why did she have to give Jacqueline the other job? And also didn't have to announce it in front of everybody at the banquet. And
that's the thing. Like, to not take Nigel aside and say, listen, I had to do this. I know it sucks because I promised you this. I got your back. Like, there'll be other opportunities, I promise you. Like, I mean, because she is
At
Miranda
least a
Priestley. Like,
conversation.
shit's gonna open
Right.
up. Like, don't blindside the dude. Like, he's
Yeah.
such a good worker. Like, to me, I mean, because listen, I've had to do shitty things as a boss, things I
Yeah.
hated. There's one thing in particular I still regret having to do, and I wish I had pushed back on it, but I didn't because it was my own ass. And it all worked out, with but it felt bad, and so
Yeah.
I would never want to do that to like, the golden rule kind of thing. But again, did Miranda really do anything wrong? And I think the only thing she did was not communicating and say, because it's perfectly, I mean, she's the one who got him the job in the first place. And so to
Yeah.
say, hey, you know what? There'll be another job like this. Like, you know what? I want, she wasn't even doing it. I mean, maybe there was a bit of selfishness, right? Because Nigel's probably her best employee. Like,
Yeah.
she can trust. I mean, I know it was hard for me when I had somebody who I trusted as a right hand, man or woman, to like have them move on to something else was really tough, because it's like, dang, this is so great, but you have to let people fly. Like, you have, or you have to compensate them. Like, that would be another thing. Well, shit, I couldn't
Yeah.
get you the job, but here's another 50 grand.
Right.
Or whatever. Here's a bone. I mean, all of that is
Well, and even just like communicating the situation, because I think like, maybe Nigel would have even been like, hey, yes, this is like a great opportunity, but I'm cool waiting a year for the next awesome opportunity to pop up if this saves your job and we can be in this together. I think that one's a harder sell for me, just because Miranda isn't in anything together with anyone.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
Nigel's comment at the end when he was like, she'll get me back. And
Will
Andy
she?
says, will she? And he's like, I have to believe she will. It's like, because that's the deal. It's like kind of the deal with the devil he's made. But even then, there are worse things that people can do. It's like, I do think it was shitty and underhanded. And I think that's probably, besides just like not being a very kind person, the worst thing we see Miranda do in the film. But even then, it's like the action in and of itself, while harmful, it's like she's the survivor, right? Like we were talking about. Like, we know who she is, and she is going to have her own back. And it's like when you back an animal into a corner, you're going to expect them not to claw you. Like, it is
Well,
kind
she's
of
putting
that.
she put on her own oxygen mask, right? In the sense
Yes.
of, hey, if I don't have, I could get, now again, could she have worked harder to find Jacqueline something else? Yeah, maybe. I mean, she didn't have to throw that. She could have protected Nigel, but at the end of the day, I like to believe I hope Nigel in this fictitious world, my hope for him is that he does get to lead his own line,
Yeah.
and that he is paid back, because he is one of my favorite characters
I was about
in
to say,
in
I
the
think
Devil Wears
that
Prada.
might take us into talking about some of the men, and I agree.
Yeah.
I absolutely love Nigel's character and that talk that he has with Andy, because at first when he starts talking and it's like, well, that's rude to be so dismissive. You know how horrible Miranda is, but he's like, you knew how bad she was, and he's so right in saying, then quit. Quit. If it's so horrible, quit. That is your option. You have an option. And he's not sitting there defending Miranda, but he is saying, like, we all have choices. And you made a choice. And it's almost like the kind of the opposite, but the same of what Nate says, where he's like, you always say you don't have a choice. And Andy is kind of there. And Nigel's the only one that's kind of like, no, you have a choice. You made a choice. Make it. And if you're gonna make the choice, like, make it wholeheartedly. Make the choice with your whole chest and go for it. And I really love that scene. Yeah, it's like just such a great scene. And then of course, like, even though the makeover is kind of the weird, like, oh, and now she's pretty, so she's good at her job, but it's just such a great scene for him to be like, and here's Chanel, and here's
Yeah, I
Prada.
know.
It's like, that's so cool.
It's like, dude, I want somebody to find me, do that for the men's,
Right.
men's section for me.
Which
I would love that.
we do have to acknowledge that he's like, these are sample sizes, which you clearly aren't. And Andy is called fat throughout the film, which is just crazy. Like, just
Well,
absolutely insane.
that's
But
the thing. So, living near New York City and being a fairly um, large guy. I mean, I'm tall. My chest is huge. I'm big, and uh, I remember once walking into like a sample, like particularly in the fashion district in New York City, like, they'll have these pop up, fashions, sample sales. I mean, most of the time, of course, it's women's clothes, but every now and then there'll be a men's fashion. I remember going into that once and like literally, like I don't think I could have gotten the whole pant around one leg, let alone
yeah.
like a boat, And so I was like, okay, I guess, and I've noticed that like I cannot fit like European sizing for me is another thing entirely. So I
So
never gonna
bit
happen.
of a bit of a tangent, but when I thrift shopping in Italy is just so much fun because you
Mm.
find amazing things. All the sizes are European sizes, and European people are just also smaller, and I'm not a small person either. Um, and the very first thrift store I went into, it was like a pop-up thrift store thing, and I was looking, and it was winter, and I hadn't packed a coat, and I was like, oh, I need a coat actually, and I found this really beautiful coat, and I tried it on, and the woman who was running the shop was like, oh, and you should definitely get it because you're not going to find much in your size here.
Oh,
And I was like, oh,
thank you.
ouch. Yeah, that it's like, even though she was right and she wasn't like making a judgment call, she was just kind of stating a fact. It was still one of those things that's like, ooh, but it's like we still get that very much in the scene, even though it's a fun scene. But he's like, we can squeeze into it. Or what does he say
A
about the
fishing
dress?
line
He's like,
and
the fishing
little,
line in Crisco.
yeah, a
Yeah.
little bit of
It's
Crisco and
just
fishing line, and we'll get you in. Yeah.
very 2006, but also very fashion.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's and so yeah, I think it's interesting that there is all this pushback right against Andy's ambition from everybody but Nigel, essentially. So
Yes.
everyone in her
Yeah.
life, and both women and men, but I would call it like this patriarchal pushback, right? This
Yeah.
idea of a woman's career should not disrupt her family, her friends, and her partner, the crucial figures of the patriarchy. And again, I think this does reflect. I mean, this happens. Like people in our life, and that's the thing. Are people in your life acting like you're a crab in a bucket, and they're trying to call you down? And that's I mean, again, I'm not saying Andy should or shouldn't have was
Right.
aspiring to something great. I have no judgment on that. But she wanted something more for herself and was reaching for it. Yet all of her friends were grabbing her and pulling her down, calling,
Yeah.
doing all these things for her. And I think that
And
that's important to see that Nigel wasn't. He was like, hey, when
yeah.
you're when you're wait till your everything collapses, then you'll know you've really made it at work, sort of thing. But he
Yeah.
doesn't judge it. He's like, that's the way it is,
Right. And I do kind of love that, like, right before she gets to go to Paris is when the breakup is, and it's like Nigel saying that was kind of like the Chekhov's gun of like, oh,
Yeah, of
everything's gonna
course.
collapse and then she's gonna get, yeah. But it's interesting that you say it's like the patriarchal pushback because I hadn't thought about it in that frame, but I think you're right. And I think one of the biggest scenes that we see that in is at her friend's gallery showing, and Christian Thompson is there and kisses her on the cheek or whatever. And it's like and then her friend sees, and it's her woman friend who's
Who's like her
gallery
bestie?
it is.
Who's her bestie too?
Right.
Why is she so fucking loyal to Nate all of a sudden? Like,
And I was
if
about to
anything was even
say,
untoward, right? Like,
which one, it's like Andy was telling him like, no, I can't. He kissed her cheek. Like, also like just a very, like, if you were in Europe again, like not a weird thing. Was it a little flirty? Sure. But for that to be the straw that broke the camel's back, and what her friend says is that Andy, I know, is madly in love with Nate. And I'm like, hang on. Your best friend of 14 years, the one that you know so well, the main characteristic that you're upset that she has changed is her boyfriend? Not anything about her, not her character, not that you don't have time for us anymore, you blew off your dad, like any of these other things that she could have said, right? That it's whether they would have been valid or not. But it's like the thing that she really took qualm with was not being loyal to her boyfriend. And it's like, and she didn't even cheat yet, even though, and then they were on a break when it's complicated, right? But it's like, she didn't kiss him. You know?
Why wouldn't your question be, hey, was something going on? Like, I noticed,
Yeah.
is there something I mean, like, these are besties, right? Like, I would hope, like, why would my bestie be like, it's not Nate's best friend. Like, I would expect that behavior from Nate's best friend. Like, yo, what's going on? Like, hey, you know, I saw Andy, you know, like, but I mean, furthermore, like, you know, yeah, I agree completely. Like, and why is she vilified for, again, what did she do that was so crappy to her friends? Like, okay, she showed up late because of work. All right, well, you knew that. Like, you know, it's not like, hey, I needed you. You promised me you'd be here for me on my wedding day, and now you can't, like, you know, or whatever. Like, this isn't like, there's never anything Andy's done in the movie to deserve this sort of pushback that she gets. But again, it's all and furthermore, Nate's a cook. Like, cooks work long fucking hours. Like, they're working like 72 hours. Like, it's like you get there at 6 a.m. and you don't leave till 10 at night often. Like, you know, like, cooks work ridiculous hours. Like, that's why they generally only date other cooks, because, like, no, you know, they're working till 2, 3 in the morning most nights. And so, you know, you can't have a real relationship, I think, in a lot of cases. So, like,
well, and it's like, you're telling me that you have this huge dream too. And like, he, at the end of the movie, gets the job in Boston, whatever. And I'm like, obviously they had broken up at that point and is kind of a complicated thing, but I'm like, you're telling me you wouldn't have expected Andy to drop everything and move with you? That, like, your career isn't important in these ways, but hers isn't?
Right.
I think that friend, that even her girlfriend, it's like, she really is an arm of the patriarchy in that scene, that it's like, whoa. And you just saw someone kiss her on the cheek and then completely went off. And it's like, what are we doing? Like, let's have a conversation, you know? And of course it's a movie, so it's a little bit different, but for the sake of like our conversation and stuff, I completely agree. And I think that Nate is unfair in a lot of ways, because even though, like, maybe Andy should have started more conversations, or the communication piece, the one scene that we see where she says, "Can we talk about this?" He just says, "I'm going to bed." And it's like, well, how is she like, maybe you just want to talk tomorrow and that's fine, but also, if you're not willing to have a conversation about it, she doesn't really know how to change her behavior that would be meeting you in the middle. Like, all she knows is that you don't like the new her and you want the old her. Well, she's changing and her life has changed. So y'all as a couple need to have a conversation about your new boundaries and dynamics. And she doesn't know what that looks like for you. And you're just going to go to bed and not talk to her about it. Like, I get it's your birthday. You get time to be upset. Like, that's fair. But at some point, like, it's not just a villain being a villain here.
Yeah, and I think it's subtle. I mean, I think that, you know, I don't think there's anything unrealistic, by the way, in this portrayal. I mean, I think that this is real life. I mean, there's nothing there that's so outrageous to me, like, in terms of how the friends behave, because I think that happens a lot. Because
totally,
well, it's all a system, right? Every interaction we have is part of a system, and when you change one thing in the system, the rest of the system doesn't like that. It seeks homeostasis. It tries to balance, you know, and all of a sudden now you've got this new thing. How does it fit in the system? And so I think it is very, you know, telling. But, you know, I think the other thing though is in terms of just for a movie that is, you know, movie led by women. I mean, you know, arguably the two main characters are women. The Devil Wears Prada woefully fails at depicting sisterhood, or at least what I would like to think is a sisterhood. None of these characters really support each other. Like, the female characters are all pitted against each other. It's women against, I mean, Emily versus Andy. You know, it's very judgmental. Like, you know, and the men, other than her friends, right? And even her friends, like, I you know, if you want my honest opinion, I feel like her girlfriend, the 14 years, was way more harsh to her than Nate was. Like, I don't actually think Nate really was that much of a dick, to be honest with you. Like, you know, and he even said at one point, like, I'm not 5. Like, it's not about the fact that you missed my birthday. It's about, and I think he had some, Andy could have communicated better. Like, it's
Right,
very,
right.
but at the same time, she's also stressed and she's growing, and maybe the relationship had run its course for that time being. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
the right decision at this point was to separate because they are
Well,
growing. Like, what's wrong with that? To say, hey,
and what
we're
he
growing in
said
different
was like,
directions.
yeah, what he said I think was actually just astute, that it's like, I just don't know if this works anymore. Like, actually, and it's like, you, of course there's going to be hurt feelings and all sorts of things about that, and that it's like when you enter into a relationship there is a certain expectation that like that person stays somewhat the same, but also I'm kind of like, well, shouldn't any good relationship be about helping each other grow? But that's another argument. But it's like, if you're growing in very different directions, it doesn't necessarily, like, even if you, like you said, merits of the way that they were growing or not, if you're growing in different directions, it doesn't mean that either of you is necessarily a bad person. It means the relationship just might not work anymore. And that's kind of what he said. He was like, yeah, I don't think this really works. But her girlfriend, who should be the one that has your back, was so like, who are you?
I don't even
And
recognize you anymore.
yeah, I do think it's interesting though. The other guy friend in their little group, I don't even remember his name. He seemed to be the one that was the most supportive.
Yes, he
Like,
was.
even when she said like, "Oh, I'm going to Paris," he was like, "And you're going to get to meet all of these people and these designers." And it's like, I want more of this energy, right? It's like when you tell someone something exciting, it's like you're I think very much, even if your friends would be disappointed, it's like, oh, well, that sucks. Like, I'm gonna miss you, but I'm so excited for you, right? It's like you can hold both of those emotions, you know? It's very immature to be like, well, I'm just pissed.
Right. Yeah. No, the whole, and I mean the whole, and relationships, at the end of the day, Andy's growing. At best, Nate is
Yeah.
fertilizer in that relationship. Like, he can't be, he's not Andy. He's not the plant. Like, he's the fertilizer. Or he's the structure, but at some point maybe you need a different fertilizer. Like, this fertilizer has done all it can do. I'm not missing these nutrients. I actually need, whatever, more nitrogen instead of carbon or whatever. I don't, this isn't fertilizer talk, but um I do, yeah, and I also want to point out at the end of the movie, right, the happy ending for Andy is she goes to work for it appears to be a male boss at a traditional newspaper. Sort of her
Yeah.
happy ever after is oh, I don't have to work with that crazy devilish boss anymore. Like, again, suggesting that men are more reasonable and than a woman like Miranda. And again, just reinforcing this trope, this notion that somehow a woman in power, female authority is problematic. That
Yeah.
it's not the natural order. So even in that, so I think the movie misses the mark in certain places from my perspective. I mean, I think if you want to use the Bechdel test, right? The Bechdel test, like, yes, I think it passes the Bechdel test. There's
Yeah.
that said, I do feel like there is a bit of a warped feminism in terms of it's all in this traditional, it's very superficial fashion, glamour. That's the pinnacle of success. Like, that's the woman's space, and so it's,
Right.
and I don't love that. It to me, it's a very narrow view of what it means to be empowered as an individual. Forget women or men, but just it doesn't feel very empowering to me in some senses. I feel it might miss the mark a little bit there. Um, but I think it tried. I think it.
Yeah.
I think maybe nothing's perfect, right? And
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I think
Yeah,
that to
I
me
think,
that's what comes up.
yeah, yeah. I think your note about sisterhood is just so well taken, that it's like it is this kind of 90s feminism, right? That is like a woman has to be like a man to be a feminist, right? As opposed to like the power of your natural femininity. And this the innate competition that we see very much, as opposed to like, hey, we're lifting each other up. When one of us succeeds, we all win. And I hadn't made that connection about her boss at the end being a man, but it's like that's very true. And the other thing is, it's like, it's not even like some amazing newspaper. I mean, maybe it is, but it doesn't seem like some high prestigious thing. But of course, she'll be able to work up through it. But I'm like, even though she's a little bit more stylish at the end in her jeans and leather jacket, than she was in the beginning with the like Argyle skirt situation. I think also going back to this false dichotomy, even though we do see the negativity and superficiality of like the fashion industry and this falsehood there, it's also this happy ending of, and she got out of all of that, as though there's no redeeming quality to anything that is like clothes make you feel good, right? Like we've all experienced putting on a new outfit and being like, I'm feeling good today. Or the difference, I will say, you feel different when you put on a pair of heels, and it's like there is something to the psychology of that, and I think I would have just liked to see more nuance in this happy ending that is like, no, it's amazing that she's going to work for a newspaper, but even he said this thing about the union, I'm forget the janitors union, maybe it was, is exactly what we do here. And I'm like, so in this whole growth, she's actually ending up right where she was in the beginning. Like I think it would have been a much
Mm.
more satisfying ending because that was the paper that she wrote in college.
Right, right,
And
right.
so I'm like, you're going back to doing exactly what you did in college before this very formative and transformative experience. Like, I think it could have been cool. What if she did investigative journalism about the fashion industry or even about like workplace culture or is something that is like, I've changed my perspective on these things and it's not all evil and demonized. And I also can wear nicer clothes and feel pretty and like, or like even if she had kept her bangs, right? Like she loses her bangs at the
Right,
end
right,
too, and
right,
I'm like,
right.
the bangs actually look good on you. You should keep the bangs. Like I would have liked to see more of like a, oh, there's still like a red lipstick or like some sort of sequin that is left from this experience as opposed to like,
Complete reset, you know, like
yeah,
episodic.
yeah,
We're back at the beginning. All this stuff
right.
happened, but we're no lessons really learned. Just
Yes.
but
And I think they try and do it a little bit, but I agree with you just in that slight missing the mark there and that slight reinforcing of tropes. I agree with your point there for sure.
yeah. Well, as my I guess my last thought, because I see we're probably wrangling on time here, but
Yeah.
I guess my closing thought, if you will, and then would love to hear yours, is I love The Devil Wears Prada. I will always love the movie. It has flaws. It's not perfect. I think we've talked a lot about them, but it's just fun, and not everything has to be
Yeah.
perfect. Because I
Right.
think it is to some degree true. I think there's a lot of truth in we do behave this way. We can pick it apart. But
Yes.
I guess the question to me, and I think about it like with my daughter, what would she take away from that? And I am happy that a movie like that was made. I think it demonstrates to young women, to her, that there is more than one way to wield power as a woman. So, my question though is how much of what we saw that was demonstrated truly serves women's liberation and truly empowers women versus just repackages patriarchal expectations, but in beautiful clothes and a false sense of power. Or yes, you can have power in your little area, but that's it. I guess that's where I wonder what she, what message does that send to her as a young woman growing and finding her own place in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. To me, it does feel very, I think it's either second or third wave feminism where it is like we can wear pants now and we can be just like men feminism as opposed to no, there's power in femininity is kind of where I see fourth wave feminism now, and some would argue we're in a fifth wave, but I'm not a feminist scholar, so I don't want to make any
Exactly. Yeah.
arguments there. But I do think that it there is a time and a place in history that I think seeing even a woman who's villainized in this position of power is progress in some sense. But at what point have we progressed past it, right? It's like you kind of need certain pieces of the puzzle to get to a better place. But at some point when you're past that piece, they no longer serve. And I think that the movie is very much a time capsule in that way of, wow, this was really powerful 20 years ago,
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I think that that's just like very much to me what it is. And I remember being little and seeing it and thinking, yeah, Miranda's just a meanie, and now being older
Right.
and being able to see more nuance in it, but also see the flaws in it too. It's almost like it feels silly to be saying this about The Devil Wears Prada, but it's like, I think it's true in the sense that if you don't study the past, you're doomed to repeat it. And that goes for even progressive movements, that like no progress is perfect. And so we should also study the ways in which the steps we took were missteps, but still maybe a step forward. But the ways in which we want to correct as we go too. For sure. But I agree with you. We'll always love this movie. It's fabulous.
Well, and just the fact that it's a movie.
I'm glad we got to watch it.
Me too. And I'm glad we got to talk about it. Just the fact that we can be talking about it 20 years later.
Yeah.
And seeing these different things does suggest that there's something to this movie. It's not, there is meat there. There's a genuine, and so again, and again, the acting was fabulous and enjoyable.
Yes.
And awesome. I'm so glad we got to discuss this, Reese. What a great conversation. And maybe the materialist will be next. I do love talking about these things. It's so fun to relate. It very much relates concepts to concrete things for me. So I love it, and always love talking about it. So
absolutely.
With that, to our listeners, we love you as always, and let us know what else you want us to talk about. We're open to ideas. So
please do, and we'll see you all next time. Bow Down is a weekly podcast from the Cohere Collective that explores esoteric and empowered feminism.
Please subscribe to Bow Down wherever you may be listening. And if you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a like, a 5-star rating, and a review. And if there's anyone you think would enjoy this episode, or maybe just needs to hear it, please share it.
If you want to stay up to date on all things Bow Down, you can follow the Cohere Collective on any social media platform at the Cohere Collective, and check out other content and offerings at www.thecoherecollective.com.
If you're interested in working with Reese to find and pursue your purpose, I encourage you to head to www.thecoherecollective.com/life-coaching.
If you're interested in working with Dennis to shed your mask and embrace your desires, you can email Dennis at dennis@theheartstoybox.com.
A huge thank you to Jack Corbett for Bow Down's music. You can find him on Instagram at j.corbe. Thank you all for joining us today. We're so glad you're here.
And as always, we hope you feel like you are living more coherently. And until next time, love.